stop trying to be smart. Not because intelligence is useless, not because knowledge doesn't matter, but because the moment being smart becomes your goal, your brain starts protecting an image instead of building an understanding. And I know how that sounds. When I say high EQ is a trap, I don't mean EQ is fake, or that smart people aren't capable, or that you should mistrust education. I mean something more precise. High EQ can become a status strategy, a way to stay safe, admired, unchallenged, and that strategy quietly punishes the exact behaviors that real learning requires. In a minute, we're going to use a very strange proof from physics associated with the style of thinking physicists like Leonard Susskind are famous for to show why this happens. It's not a proof on a chalkboard. It's a demonstration in human nature. When the smartest people in the world faced a paradox they couldn't talk their way out of, the only thing that worked was the willingness to look confused in public and follow the problem wherever it led. And the twist is this: the universe didn't reward the people who sounded smartest. It rewarded the people who stayed honest. So let's name the trap. The ick trap starts the moment intelligence becomes identity. When you're labeled gifted, advanced, the smart one, you don't just learn math or reading faster. You learn a social rule. Being smart keeps you safe. It gets you praise. It gets you attention. It turns teachers into allies. It makes adults treat you like you're going somewhere. Sometimes it protects you from being ignored. So your mind does what minds do. It adapts. It begins to optimize for the thing that brings reward, looking intelligent. And the day you start optimizing for looking intelligent, learning becomes dangerous. Because learning requires a phase where you don't look intelligent. Learning requires questions that expose gaps. Learning requires sitting with confusion. Learning requires being wrong in front of other people. Learning requires saying the sentence the smart identity hates most, I don't know. This is why the trap is so invisible. From the outside, it can look like success, good grades, confident speech, quick answers, a reputation. But internally, something changes. You stop moving toward truth and start moving toward performance. You pick problems you can win quickly. You avoid problems where you might be a beginner. You speak in polished abstractions because they're harder to falsify. You debate to win instead of to update. You defend your conclusions like they're part of your body. And what makes this especially cruel is that high IQ can make the trap easier to maintain. If you're verbally fluent, you can produce explanations that sound like understanding. You can build a beautiful fog complex, enough that other people hesitate to challenge it, and vague enough that you don't have to confront the missing pieces in your own model. So the trap isn't smart people are wrong. The trap is smart people can be wrong with confidence. Now here's our first open loop, and keep it in your mind as we go. If the goal isn't be smart, what is the goal? And how do we tell the difference between real understanding and a performance that merely looks like it? We'll answer that. But to do it cleanly, we're going to borrow a lesson from physics, because physics is one of the few arenas where reality is allowed to be the final judge. In everyday life, you can sometimes get away with sounding right. In physics, a wrong model eventually hits a wall. And one of the hardest walls in modern physics came from black holes. Before we go there, let's take a quick step back and ask a deceptively simple question. What does it mean to understand something? Most people confuse understanding with familiarity. If you've heard the terms, if you can repeat a definition, if you can nod at the right moments, you feel like you understand. But familiarity is not understanding. Understanding is when you can reconstruct the idea from the inside, when you can explain it in your own words, when you can say what would happen if you changed the conditions, when you can tell the difference between what you know and what you're guessing. Here's a clean analogy. Imagine knowledge is like having a map, and understanding is like knowing the terrain. A map can be memorized. A map can be shown off. A map can be framed and hung on a wall. Terrain knowledge is different. It's slower. It's earned by walking. It includes the awkward parts, getting lost, backtracking, realizing a shortcut doesn't exist, discovering the bridge is out. The smart identity loves maps because maps are social. Terrain knowledge is private, messy, humbling, but terrain knowledge is what keeps you alive when the route changes. Now, if that's true in a forest, it's even more true in science. The reason physicists respect certain thinkers isn't that they can recite impressive facts. It's that they can walk the terrain of an idea, especially when the terrain is weird, and quantum physics is weird. Classically, we imagine the world as local and intuitive. Things have properties. Information sits inside objects like a note inside an envelope. If you know where the envelope is, you know where the information is. Quantum mechanics disrupts this comfort. It doesn't just add uncertainty. It changes what counts as the state of a system. It makes relationships correlations fundamental. It teaches you that your classical intuition is not a reliable guide to the deep structure of reality. And that brings us to black holes. A black hole, at first glance, seems like the ultimate simple object. A region where gravity is so strong that once you cross a boundary, the event horizon, you can't come back out. Now imagine you throw something into a black hole, a book, a hard drive, a library, something filled with information. In the classical picture, it's gone. The black hole is a one-way door. Information falls in, and that's the end of the story. But then quantum physics enters and refuses to be ignored. Stephen Hawking showed that black holes aren't perfectly black. They emit radiation due to quantum effects near the horizon. Over vast timescales, a black hole can evaporate. So we get a question that sounds almost childish. And that's why it matters. If the black hole evaporates, where did the information go? At this point, you can almost feel the eek trap trying to activate, because one response is to hide behind complexity. Oh, that's too advanced. Nobody can really know. But physics doesn't let you escape like that, because the question is not philosophical, it's technical, and it's sharp. In quantum mechanics, information is not supposed to be destroyed. The evolution of an isolated system is, at the deepest level, reversible. If you knew the complete state, the laws would allow you to reconstruct the past. Hawking's early conclusion suggested the radiation is thermal featureless, carrying no trace of the details of what fell in. That would mean information loss. And information loss doesn't just break black hole physics, it threatens the logic of quantum theory itself. This became one of the most intense intellectual battles in modern theoretical physics, and physicists like Leonard Susskind became central voices arguing that information must be preserved, that the universe can't simply delete truth. Now pause here, because this is where the proof begins. And if high eek were the whole game, this would have been solved immediately by the smartest person in the room. It wasn't. For years, brilliant physicists argued. They produced sophisticated reasoning. They had powerful reputations. And the paradox stayed. Why? Because the obstacle wasn't the lack of intelligence, it was the collision of intuitions, classical versus quantum, and the human temptation to protect a coherent story even when reality is demanding an update. Black holes became a mirror held up to the human mind. You could not look smart your way out. You had to admit you were confused. You had to let your cherished picture of space and information be questioned. And that's the first part of the Susskind-style proof that smartness is a trap when it becomes identity. Reality doesn't care how elegant your story sounds. Reality cares whether your story is consistent. Now here's where it gets even stranger, and it's the next rung on the ladder. Black holes have entropy. Entropy in physics is not just disorder. It's a measure of how many macroscopic possibilities correspond to the same macroscopic appearance. It's a measure of hidden information. If you imagine a black hole as a three-dimensional object, you might expect its entropy to scale with its volume. More interior space, more possible microstates. But the universe does something that feels almost like a prank. Black hole entropy scales with surface area, with the area of the event horizon, not the volume. The boundary, that single fact should make you uncomfortable, because it's telling you that our naive picture of where the information is may be wrong. It suggests that the fundamental degrees of freedom in a region of space might be counted on the boundary, not in the bulk. That information storage is tied to surfaces, not volumes. And if you're the kind of person who is trying to look smart, here is where you might try to rescue your pride with more words. But if you're trying to understand, you do something else. You stop. You stare at the weirdness. You ask, what does this force us to believe? This is the posture that physicists like Susskind are known for in their best moments, treating paradoxes as clues, not as embarrassments, not smoothing them over, not decorating them with terminology, letting them bite. From this biting clue comes a radical idea often called the holographic principle. The intuition is simple to say, hard to accept. Maybe the information in a volume of space can be fully represented on its boundary. Think of a hologram, a flat surface that encodes a three-dimensional image. The 3D world appears real and navigable. but the underlying encoding lies on a lower dimensional surface. In physics, the claim is not the world is fake. The claim is subtler. The world may have multiple equivalent descriptions, and in at least some contexts, the bulk description can be translated into a boundary description. Emergent does not mean imaginary. Emergent means real at the level where it operates, not fundamental at the deepest bookkeeping. A hurricane is emergent. It's not a basic particle, but it can destroy a city. Temperature is emergent. It's not in one molecule, but it can boil water. A mind is emergent. It's not a single neuron, but it can change the world. The smarting ass now, we're not making a claim that your daily life is literally governed by a holographic boundary. That would be a leap. But we are extracting a lesson about thinking, because holography is one of the most dramatic examples of a truth that smartness alone does not guarantee you'll accept. Your intuition about where things are can be wrong. Your intuition about what is basic can be wrong. Your intuition about what counts as an explanation can be wrong. And once you learn that lesson in physics, you start seeing it everywhere in psychology, in organizations, in relationships, in your own inner monologue. Now we climb the next rung carefully. There is a famous theoretical framework where holography becomes concrete, add CFD, proposed by Juan Moldesina. In that setup, a gravitational theory in a higher dimensional spacetime can be equivalent to a quantum theory without gravity living on a lower dimensional boundary. It's a proof of concept that the holographic idea is not just poetry. It works in a well-defined mathematical model. Important caveat: our universe is not exactly the kind of space used in that model, so this is not a direct description of reality as we observe it. Physicists treat it as an extraordinarily important laboratory, not a final answer for everything. But as a lesson about the mind, it's priceless, because it shows that two descriptions can look completely different, one with gravity and extra spatial depth, one without, and yet describe the same underlying truth. So here's a question that should make you pause. If physics can offer two radically different stories that are secretly the same, how many of your personal beliefs are just one story among many, defended mainly because it makes you feel smart to hold it? This is where the eek trap quietly reveals its real cost. The cost isn't that you'll miss trivia. The cost is that you'll cling to one flattering description when a better description is available. The trap makes you conservative not politically, but cognitively. It makes you protect your current self-image rather than upgrade your model. Now, let's close the open loop from earlier. What is the real goal, if not be smart? The goal is to be less wrong in a way that stays connected to reality, and that goal has a totally different set of habits. A smart identity says, speak quickly, never hesitate, always have a take. A truth-seeking identity says, slow down, define terms, test the model, update in public. This is why the proof we're building doesn't require a lab coat. It's visible in how breakthroughs actually happen. Black hole physics didn't advance because someone performed intelligence perfectly. It advanced because people tolerated embarrassment, sat with contradictions, and kept a childlike grip on basic questions. What is information? Where is it stored? What can be lost? What must be preserved? These sound almost too simple for such an advanced topic. But that's the point. When you're trapped in high-ick mode, you avoid simple questions because they feel beneath you. You reach for complexity to signal status. When you're trying to understand, you love simple questions because they expose the structure. So here is the Susskind style test you can run on yourself, no equations, no special background. Take any belief you hold in a domain where you like being seen as smart. It could be politics, nutrition, finance, education, psychology, productivity, human nature, anything. Now, ask yourself 4 questions first. Can I explain it without using prestige words? Not because prestige words are forbidden, but because if your understanding is real, you can translate it into plain language. Second, what would change my mind? If the honest answer is nothing, you are not holding a belief, you are holding an identity. Third, where is the edge of my knowledge? Can you point to the exact step where your explanation turns into, and then it kind of just happens? Fourth, can I make a prediction that could embarrass me? Because the fastest way to separate understanding from performance is to risk being checkably wrong. If you could do those 4 things, you're probably learning. If you can't, it doesn't mean you're unintelligent. It means you've drifted into the trap, optimizing for status instead of contact with reality. Now, there's a reason this trap hits high people especially hard. Because intelligence is often rewarded early with speed. You answer faster, you see patterns faster, you get things right without studying as much. People tell you you're gifted. Speed becomes your signature. But eventually, every serious field presents a wall where speed fails. The problems get deep enough that everyone is slow, everyone is confused, everyone needs time. And when speed is your identity, slowness feels like death. So you do what the smart identity always does. You retreat to arenas where your speed still wins, and you call that staying in your lane. But it's not a lane, it's a cage. This is why some of the most talented people never build anything that matches their potential. They aren't defeated by difficulty. They're defeated by the emotional experience of not being exceptional anymore. And the irony is brutal. The exact moment you're no longer the fastest is often the moment you're approaching the edge of real growth. Now let's do a pattern interrupt, something you can try today. Think of a topic you genuinely care about, not one you're trying to impress people with. Maybe it's your health, your family, a skill you want, your work, your relationships. Now imagine you had to teach that topic to someone you love, and someone who won't be impressed by vocabulary. Someone who just wants the truth because it matters. How would you speak? Would you perform? Or would you get clear? That's the mindset shift. Not how do I sound, but what is actually true and how can I make it usable? This is a deep theme in good physics education too. The point of an explanation is not to show that you're advanced. The point is to make the structure of reality graspable. And that is why the best communicators in physics, Susskind included, often return to pictures, analogies, and ladders of intuition. Not because the math doesn't matter, but because intuition is how humans hold the idea long enough to test it. Now, let's be careful about one more thing. Saying stop trying to be smart does not mean stop valuing intelligence. It means stop performing intelligence as a substitute for understanding. Because the world has two kinds of problems that reward looking smart and problems that punish it. Looking smart can win arguments. It can win social approval. It can win job interviews. But reality-facing problems, building a product, raising a child, keeping a relationship healthy, managing your health, navigating uncertainty punish performance. They punish ego. They punish people who can't admit confusion early. That's why Hayek becomes a trap in adult life. School often rewards performance. Life rewards adaptation. Now we can say the core lesson as a single line, Hayek is a tool, but being smart is a costume. Tools are useful. Costumes are fragile. So what do we do instead? What's the alternative identity? We replace I am smart with I am a learner. And that identity has different reflexes. When you don't know, you get curious instead of defensive. When someone challenges you, you ask what they see that you don't. When you're wrong, you update without drama. When you feel confused, you treat it as the doorway to the next level. This sounds simple. It is not easy. It requires humility. And humility is emotionally expensive, especially if you've built a life around never looking uncertain. But here's the reward, and it's real. Once you stop protecting the smart label, you become more flexible. You take on harder problems, you learn faster, you become harder to manipulate, you become more honest with yourself. And now we can close the last loop. Why bring Susskind into this at all? Because the story of black hole information, entropy scaling with area, holography, the willingness to take a paradox seriously, is a case study in what happens when intelligence stops being a performance and becomes a pursuit. It's not about hero worship. It's about a method. Respect reality more than reputation. Respect consistency more than cleverness. Respect the question more than the persona. So here's the ending challenge. Pick one thing you talk about with confidence. And tonight, for 10 minutes, try to explain it in plain language on a blank page. No prestige words unless you immediately translate them. No escaping into vagueness, just mechanism. Then read it and circle the sentences that feel like fog sentences that sound impressive but don't actually explain anything. Those circles are not evidence that you're stupid. They are evidence that you just found the edge of your understanding. And the edge of your understanding is the most valuable location in your entire mind, because that's where growth happens if you don't run away from it. Stop trying to be smart. Try to be clear. Try to be honest. Try to be the kind of person who can say, without flinching, I don't know yet. Because in the long run, the people who win aren't the ones who looked smart the whole time. They're the ones who stay teachable long enough for reality to reveal its structure. If this way of thinking resonates, subscribe for more documentaries that connect big scientific ideas to everyday mental habits without the noise and without pretending certainty where it doesn't exist. And leave a comment with this. What's one belief you're willing to deperform this week? One topic where you'll trade sounding smart for understanding what's actually true.